This is John Jackson Miller, and you're listening to the Star Wars Canon Podcast. May the Force be with you.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Canon Podcast, episode 69. I am your host, Brian Miller, and I'm so glad you've decided to join me to talk about our favorite thing in the world, yet again, Star Wars. Welcome to our second live show for this new iteration of the Star Wars Canon Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. If you guys are listening on Spotify and you're listening on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast after the fact, just know that we are shooting this episode live now. We're streaming live on YouTube. So if you'd ever like to jump in and join the episode, talk in the live chat, kind of hang out with us a little bit, you can catch us every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time right here streaming live. So guys, it's going to be kind of a little bit of a shorter episode tonight. It's not that big of a deal. Really, there's not a whole lot to talk about in the way of news because we have Celebration kicking off in like less than 12 hours. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of news coming up in the following, and probably in next week's episode. And so I figured tonight we would just talk about The Mandalorian, the episode that we got last night, and answer a few mailbag questions for you. I think I've got 4 mailbag questions picked out this week, and there are 4 really good questions. As always, you guys send great questions in. So I figured we'd talk a little bit about that. But before we get into the Star Wars stuff, I want to let you guys know, mark your calendars for May 6th. We're going to be doing the 24-hour live stream for veteran suicide, trying to raise awareness and try to prevent veteran suicide. It's a cause that it's very close to me. It's something that hits very close to home. It's something that I've dealt with on a personal level firsthand, and it's something that means a lot to me. I've lost battle buddies to veteran suicide, and so it's something that, like I said, means a lot to me, and I want to do what I can to try to end this. So the way we're going to be doing this is during the live stream, I'm going to be playing 24 hours of Jedi Fallen Order, and then when we finish Fallen Order, we're going to be slipping right into Jedi Survivor. Jedi Survivor comes out the week before, so that'll be our first dip into it. We'll probably be really tired getting into it for the first time, but that's okay. So we're gonna be playing some Jedi games, and during the stream, what we're gonna be doing is I've got behind me all of my old hardback books that are canon. I've got everything from A New Dawn up to Light of the Jedi. I've got 5 or 6, 7, I think 7 years of hardback novels. And a couple of years ago, I went digital on my collection. I repurchased all my novels in a digital format and got them on a Kindle. So now these are basically just taking up space. They're a cool backdrop for the videos, yes, but they're basically just taking up space. And what I would like to do is get them into the hands of people who are going to appreciate them, people who are maybe looking for that Holy Grail novel for their hardback collection that they've never been able to find. But I want to make sure that they are going to somebody that's going to appreciate them. And so, as a thank you for your donation during the live stream, if you guys donate over a certain amount, I will have a list of which novels you guys can pick from, and I'll send you as a thank you for your donation to show you how much that donation means to me. So hopefully we can get rid of all of the novels. Hopefully we can get rid of every single one of them that I'm going to be giving out, and we can raise some money for a really good cause. So like I said, I'll bring the placard up again. Mark your calendar for May 6th. That's going to be from 7 p.m. to 7 p.m. It's a Saturday night going into a Sunday night. I set it up that way so that I can just crash at the end of it and just basically slip right into my sleep for work on Monday. So that's kind of what we're doing with the live stream. I'm very excited about it. I can't wait for it. I meant to do it on Veterans Day last year. had some personal stuff come up and we had to reschedule it to that. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's actually a month from tonight. Now that I'm looking at it, today it's April 6th. It's actually 1 month from tonight. So like I said, I'm excited. So let's get into some Star Wars stuff, shall we? That's what you guys are here for. I've got, like I said, the one review I want to talk about, and then I'm going to get into your mailbag questions. And this may, like I said, this may not be a very long episode this week. I thought Usif was going to be able to join me this week, but he messaged me this afternoon and let me know that he's kind of coming down with something, and he wasn't sure he was going to make it onto the show. I told him that was fine. Get the rest you need. The show will always be here. So he's leaving me alone tonight. He's letting me fend for myself. So no big deal. We'll talk a little bit about some of these mailbag questions. But before we get to mailbag, The Mandalorian. If you guys are watching this, then you've probably seen that the newest episode of The Mandalorian dropped last night. And this one, I think it was Chapter 22, Guns for Hire. It was a bizarre episode, to say the least. I personally walked away from it I told Kirsty when it was over, I'm not entirely impressed with this episode. I keep seeing online people describing it as a video game side quest, and that's exactly what this episode felt like to me. And that sums it up perfectly. There were some moments in it that were really cool. Seeing the B-1s again, seeing the super battle droids was really cool. That was nice. Hearing that classic Clone Wars battle droid, Roger, Roger, again, that was really, really cool. And like I said, there were a couple of little moments in it. The last 10 minutes were fire. The last 10 minutes of this episode were absolutely awesome. They were great. That is what the entire episode should have been. Going into this episode, I was excited because it was a Bryce Dallas Howard episode. And I really thought that this one was going to be, one of the best episodes ever, especially considering we only had 3 episodes left. Now we're down to 2. And so I was really hoping that this episode would really kick something off, because the season so far doesn't seem to have like an underlying story. The Mandalorian stuff is there, right? It's that story of going back to Mandalore and Bo-Katan seeing the Mythosaur and getting the Darksaber back. That's there. But the entire season itself doesn't have this underlying quest, if you would. And so I don't know what's going on with the season. It just, maybe once it's all out, it'll make more sense. But for right now, it just seems like a jumbled mess. We only have 2 episodes left. Maybe, hopefully, I'll be corrected. Hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully it turns out to be something really great. But as of right now, I'm not entirely sure what's going on with the season. And, we got to talk about the elephant in the room with this episode also. There were 3 huge cameos in this episode. 3 huge celebrity cameos, which, personally, it kind of took me out of the show a little bit. One of the things you always hear about the original Star Wars movie, with an exception of Sir Alec Guinness, with an exception of him, most of the people that were in the original Star Wars movie they were nobodies. They were no names. Nobody knew who they were, right? And so, Harrison Ford had been in American Graffiti, but it wasn't like the breakout star yet, right? Nobody really associated any of those actors with another role that they had known really well. At the time, Sir Alec Guinness, I get it. But even when you go back and watch some of his other stuff, his Obi-Wan Kenobi portrayal was, completely different. It was a completely different character than anything he had played before, and he stood out. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird to say this, so see if you can follow me for a second. When I see Harrison Ford in Star Wars, I don't see Harrison Ford, I see Han Solo. When I see Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones, I don't see Indiana Jones. I don't see Han Solo, I see Indiana Jones. And he's one of those actors that can pull that off, right? When we were watching this episode last night, and the doors open, and Jack Black is standing there, excuse me, I'm still coming off the respiratory thing. I sat there and stared at him for a second. I'm like, is that Jack Black? Sure enough, it was. And then it took me a second to realize that Lizzo was sitting right next to him. And I'm like, really? Like that? It just pulls me out, because, even his character seemed like a Jack Black character. It seemed like Jack Black, right? And so I was like, what is going on right now, And I don't know a whole lot about Lizzo. I don't listen to that kind of music personally, but I recognize who she was. And I was like, why are they putting these giant pop culture names in this episode? And then they keep going with it, and they roll in Christopher Lloyd, which, don't get me wrong, I am a massive Christopher Lloyd fan. I love Back to the Future. I love almost everything he's ever done. And seeing him in Star Wars was a little jarring. I think they got a good role for him. I think he fit the role pretty well, but it was still one of those things where it felt, you could blatantly tell that it was Christopher Lloyd. And so it pulled me out a little bit, and I don't know, just that episode. And then at the end with the knighting of Grogu and everything, it just seemed unnecessary. The episode itself seemed unnecessary until we got to the last 10 minutes. Honest to God, so this episode felt like it felt like Mando and Bo-Katan went to Disney World and met met Nacho Libre and had a Law and Order episode, a CSI Miami episode is what it felt like. There was a droid morgue in this episode, a droid morgue. You heard that right. A morgue for droids. Literally open their fridge door, slide the bed out. There's the dead droid. What? There was a really cool part in this episode. Like I said earlier, there were some moments in this episode that were a lot of fun. One of them was the droid bar, and the resistor, I think is what it was called. And as soon as they walked in, music stopped. All of the droids turned around and looked at them, and they're all drinking their oil, whatever. And Kirsty goes, wouldn't it be great if one of the droids looks at him and says, hey, we don't serve your kind here, as a callback to the original Star Wars? And I was like, that would be amazing. And so as they're walking through the crowd, I'm like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. If I was an anime character, I'd be doing that quivery, watery thing where I was like, it's going to happen. And as they're walking through, Mando makes the comment, I don't think they get many of our kind here. And I was like, oh, you wasted the opportunity. It could have been so great to have that line in there. It's coming from a droid, right? Especially considering they were so worried about humans kind of taking their place or whatever. There were a couple of moments that were all right. But for the most part, this just seemed like a very unnecessary episode. It almost felt like a tag-on episode. And this late in the season, this felt like an episode that should have been toward, the first half of the season and not this close to the finale. We should be building to something in this one, right? We know Gideon's out there. We know he's in this season. We have 2 episodes left. I really thought he was going to be popped up by now and be the main antagonist, right? Alas, not yet. So hopefully we'll see him pop up next week, maybe. But I wasn't a massive fan of this episode. Like I said, the last 10 minutes were the absolute best part of this episode. And they could have built the entire episode around that, to be honest. The side quest seemed unnecessary. I know what's going on, though, because the Duchess of this planet made the comment, if you ever need us again, let us know, right? They're going to end up coming into play later on. That's what's going to end up happening. Whether it be the crossover event that we're talking about, that we'll talk about here in a little bit on Mailbag, or if it's something else, you know what I mean? Like, so they're going to end up coming back into play with the whole, call us if you ever need us thing. They're going to be back, which kind of disappoints me because I'm not a huge fan of their characters. Anyway, other than that, the episode felt, pretty unnecessary, and it wasn't what I was expecting. I don't think it was what a lot of people were expecting. I know some people had a lot of fun with this episode and said it was a great one. But it just fell flat for me. So, and that's not a good thing this close to the end of the season, especially a season that, like I said, it's been kind of a jumbled mess. There's really not an underlying thread that holds it all together. So, let me know in the comments, what did you guys think of this week's episode of Mandalorian? Keep it civil. You guys know how I am. I know how fans are. So keep it civil. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments. Yeah. Episode of Mandalorian fell flat for me. I'm really hoping that the next 2 episodes pick up. And I'm willing to bet that the next 2 episodes are going to be aired at Celebration. I'm willing to bet that that's going to end up happening. Or at least maybe the next one. I don't know. Celebration likes to show episodes early for people who aren't there. Or for people who are there. And the rest of us just have to sit and wait. So we'll see. But anyway, that does it for Mando. I'll get off of that because, like I said, it was honestly probably my least favorite episode of Mando I've seen so far. And I really love Mando. Don't get me wrong. I really love Mando, but I'm thinking that was my least favorite episode out of all of them so far. All 22 episodes so far, I think that was my least favorite episode. All right, let's get into some mailbag questions. Let's talk about what you guys want to talk about. How do you guys get a question on the Star Wars Canon Podcast? You email it to me at starwarscanonpodcast@gmail.com. I'll go through each week, pick a few out. I usually shoot them over to Usif and let him start coming up with some answers in advance so that we can talk about them. But alas, like I said, Usif's not here this week. And that's why there's only 4. I thought, that, I was thinking with Usif and I on here going back and forth, because Usif and I like to derail a little bit. We like to talk about some other things once in a while. No big deal, but it's fine. So let's get into this, shall we? The first question this week comes from Ben Hoffman. And Ben says, "Hello there, Brian and Usif. So glad to see you two back on the show together. The new look of the show is great, and I love your commentary on all things Star Wars. Keep up the great work." Thank you very much for the kind words, Ben. We do appreciate it here. Ben goes on to say, "My question for your show is, why doesn't Lucasfilm put out more than one film per year? Marvel releases 2 or 3 a year, no problem, good or bad. Do you think we'll ever get to a time we're getting more than one a year? Thank you for everything you do for the fandom." Thanks for sending in the question, Ben. And it's a legitimate question at this point, because I'm sorry, wrong slide. We're coming off of like 6 years. By the time we get a film, it'll have been 6 years since we had one. And I say this quite a bit. It's embarrassing for Lucasfilm. That is embarrassing in my opinion. If I was Lucasfilm, I would be embarrassed that I haven't had a film out in 6 years. When Marvel's over here kicking out TV shows, 3 TV shows a year, 3 films a year. You know what I mean? And it's crazy to me that Lucasfilm isn't doing this as well. Will we ever get to that point? I hope so. I don't think Star Wars is a franchise that... Look, think about this. Why are people so upset when a Star Wars movie sucks? Okay? Think about it. Last Jedi is a great example. Last Jedi was a very divisive film. It came out, and then we had to wait 2 years. And for 2 years, we had the Solo film, but, we went a year and a half without a Star Wars movie before we got Rise of Skywalker. I think the reason people get so upset with Star Wars movies not being great in their opinion is because there are so few of them. Because there are so few of them, we have to get it right every single time, right? Marvel can put out a bad movie once in a while and be forgiven because, hey, in 3 months we're getting Guardians of the Galaxy 3 or whatever. You know what I mean? Star Wars doesn't have that luxury right now. I don't think people would get fatigued with it. And I think putting out 2 movies a year, they don't have to go nuts and do 3 movies a year like Marvel does. But if they were to start putting out 2 a year, which I think is a very well-spaced iteration and a good cadence for Star Wars movies. I think every 6 months, that's perfect. Especially considering at the 6 month mark, that's when you're putting your first trailer out for your next one. Attach it to the one that's coming out now. You've got your target audience right there. You know what I mean? So I think 6 months is a really good cadence for Star Wars movies. I don't think people are going to get fatigued. And I think that if Lucasfilm were to put out a bomb, I shouldn't even say a bomb, a stinker. Let's put out a bad Star Wars movie. Most people will be like, okay, well, at least we don't have to wait 2 years for the next one. We'll try again in December, So I think, especially after they've already seen the trailer for the next one, and they go, well, that one didn't look real great. That one wasn't real good. But man, that one coming out in 6 months looks good. I'm going to go check that one out. I think 6 months would be a really good cadence for Star Wars movies. And why aren't they doing it? That's a great question. That's a great question. What's going on behind the scenes that we don't know about? What's going on behind the scenes that we do know about? You know what I mean? Which of the rumors are we hearing are true? Which ones aren't? And just what is going on with Star Wars? It's a legitimate question. It's definitely something. It's a deeper question than what I think anybody even realizes. Is why aren't we getting 2 Star Wars movies a year? I think after Celebration, after tomorrow, because I think this time tomorrow we'll know the next 3 Star Wars movies coming out. At least the next one. Maybe they're going to spread those 3 film announcements out throughout the weekend. They don't want to blow their proverbial load. First panel, right? But I'm pretty sure this time tomorrow we're going to know the next Star Wars movie coming out. And so I think once they kind of sit down and tell us we've got a plan, we've got a roadmap where we're going, we know what we're doing, we're not doing these movies because they don't match with our roadmap, which is a great sign, by the way. Don't make a movie just for the sake of making a movie. Make a movie that needs to be made to tell the story you want to tell. And I think tomorrow we'll have a better picture of where we're going, what the future of Star Wars looks like, at least for the next 5 or 6 years. You know, hopefully the next 10 years. That'd be great. But at least for the next 5 or 6 years, I think we're going to know where we're going at this point. But yeah, I think we could definitely get to a point where, and look, you could really make these movies stand apart. You know, here in a little bit, we're going to talk about, Here in a little bit, we're going to be talking about canon versus legends and stuff like that. So let's talk about some canon movies that are in completely different time periods. Why couldn't we do, you know, let's say they wanted to start doing High Republic films, release those in May. You could still do a yearly Star Wars movie for a story in May. Every May, there's a new, you know, High Republic movie. And then every December, there's a whole nother story going on. So you've got these two separate stories going. If you're not a fan of one, you still get a Star Wars movie every year, you know? So I think that 6-month cadence would work really, really well. And like I said, attaching the trailers to the one before it, I think that is just, like I said, you've got your target audience right there. I think that's the way to go. Will we ever get to that point? I sure hope so. I absolutely hope we get to the point where we're having 2 Star Wars movies a year. Like I said, I think 3 is too many. I think 3, because at that point you're rushing them. Look at what's going on with Marvel right now. Kicking out 3 movies a year it's not looking great for some of these films. You know, the quality has really dipped. So I think 2 is the perfect cadence for Star Wars. You know, and then if you start getting them right and you start knocking out, I mean, you start getting movies that are knocking it out of the park, and you know, this will never happen. But if you start releasing a new Empire Strikes Back every 6 months, yeah, kick it up to every 4 months. Do a movie every 4 months, you know, and then if the quality starts to slip, knock it back down to 2, you know, hey, that's the perfect number. So I think they need to start experimenting with it. I think they're scared to do it right now because of some of the fan backlash that has happened. And so it's one of those things. I think they're scared to do it at the moment, but I think it's going to end up coming down the line somewhere that we're going to be getting 2 films a year. I mean, like I said, we're going to be coming off 6 years with no film by 2025. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing for Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm hasn't even put out a movie. You know, I mean, they're getting ready to put out Indiana Jones. Lucasfilm hasn't put out a film in theaters since 2019. It has been 4 years. Well, it's been 3.5 years. It's been 3.5 years since they even put a movie out. And so I think we're going to be coming up on an age of Star Wars here. I'm not going to say it's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years, but I think maybe 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to start seeing that cadence of 2 a year. I think we are. So thanks for the question. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear what you guys' thoughts are on double Star Wars films a year. Is that too many for you? Do you just want one a year? Is it that you want one a year so you've got that one special time a year to look forward to? Or are you greedy like me and you want 2 movies a year and you want one every 6 months? Do you think that cadence would work? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear what you guys' thoughts are on that. So thanks for sending in the question. I do appreciate it. Question number 2 this week comes from Christine Marshall. And Christine says, I found your show a couple of weeks ago and fell in love with it. Your knowledge of Star Wars mixed with your tolerance of others' opinions make you stand out from the rest of the channels that just want to bash on Star Wars. No one hates Star Wars as much as Star Wars fans. So thank you for staying true to your passion. Thank you very kindly, Christine. I do appreciate that. What do you think the percentage chances are we'll get a Star Wars movie with Han, Luke, and Leia from the original trilogy era? I love your show, and I'm glad it's getting some recognition. Thank you very kindly for the kind words. And, yeah, are we ever going to get young Han, Luke, and Leia again? It's something I've talked about this recently. I don't remember if it was on this show or if it was on Star Wars Newsnet live. I don't remember which one it was. But we could totally get that now. The technology exists. We've already used it. We've already seen it. You know, Rogue One was kind of a pioneer in that with Leia and Tarkin. Granted, it looked a little clunky at the time. And, I mean, you have to give them credit. They really went for it. I mean, I think they stuck the landing. I think they could have done it without twisting their ankle, but they stuck the landing. And so since then, you know, we've seen Luke and Mando, and he looked better than Leia and Tarkin did. but he still looked a little off. And I remember when that happened, everybody's like, he looks a little off, but he looked pretty good overall, all things considered. Now we've gotten Book of Boba Fett, where we saw Luke Skywalker, and you want to talk about perfection. Luke Skywalker in the Book of Boba Fett, the de-aging, the deep fake, whatever it was, the technique that they used for that, the voice, the AI voice that they created, all of it was perfect. You would be hard-pressed to sit down and watch those episodes of Book of Boba Fett, or at least that one episode with Luke Skywalker in it, and find the seams, find where they digitized it, because it is really good. I was really impressed. It looked leaps and bounds better than it did in Mando. Now, remember, Rogue One and Mando had to happen so that the Luke Skywalker and Book of Boba Fett could run, right? They had to walk so this one could run. And look at what we have to show for it. We have an amazing episode of Luke Skywalker that's believable, that we actually are like, holy crap, that's Mark Hamill. They went back in time and pulled Mark Hamill from the 80s and had him do an episode of Book of Boba Fett and sent him back. I'm impressed. We know in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, they're going to be deep faking and de-aging Harrison Ford, and that's in the trailer. Looks great. It looks so good. Now, granted, that might change seeing it on the big screen, but for the trailer and for the quick little, shot they showed of young Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, looked great. It looked so good. We even did the de-aging on Luke and Leia in Rise of Skywalker, which, again, a little clunky, not bad, but, just a little there. But they really went for it, and I think it paid off. They've slowly, between Rogue One, Rise of Skywalker, and Mando, they really worked on perfecting that, and they got it right in the Book of Boba Fett, which at this point, yes, I'm going to say at some point we very well could see. Now, I know there's a lot of legal red tape to get through with likenesses of actors, especially considering Carrie Fisher's no longer with us. We don't know. Oh, God, I'm probably going to regret saying this. We don't know how much longer Harrison Ford's going to be with us. Mark Hamill, we probably still have quite a bit of time with him, but we could definitely do a movie with Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie. We have a new Chewbacca that is great with the droids, 3PO and R2. We could totally do a film with them. With Lando, we haven't seen a de-aged Lando yet. But with what they've done with Mark Hamill and what they've done with Harrison Ford, yeah, give it a shot. I'm not gonna tell you not to do it. You could easily do it. Maybe not easily. On paper it's easy. But you could do a story. You could write a story with these characters and tell a story with them and see them all on the big screen again together. And the technology exists. So what's the percentage chance that it's going to happen? That was the question. What is the percentage chance? I am going to say, man, I don't want to give it a 50-50 because I don't think it's that high. I'm going to give it 30%. I think it's a 30% chance that we end up. Oh, I don't know if you guys heard that or not. I think it's a 30% chance that we end up getting a film with all three of them in it. And I don't know, telling what story. I don't know what that would be. But I'm going to say 30%. That's my answer. So, thanks for sending in the question. I do appreciate it. And it's something that's really fun to think about, is trying to figure out who could play those roles, because somebody has to physically be there. But to see something like that, I think that'd be a lot of fun. And I would definitely be there. And dude, you want to talk about breaking box office records? That would break every box office record. Every single one of them. Every single one. So I'm here for it. I definitely think that it'd be a lot of fun to do something like that. So thanks for sending in the question. I do appreciate it. Question number 3. Let's get to question number 3. And question is, hey, Brian. Oh, I'm sorry. First, it comes from Katie Frake. And Katie says, hey, Brian, I hope this email finds you well. I'm looking forward to your live stream in May and think it's a great cause to get behind. My brother was in the U.S. Army and has dealt with some hard times since being home, so it's a cause that hits close to home for me as well. Thank you for doing that. Thank you so much for letting me know about that. And And make sure to let your brother know that we said thank you from here for your service. And yeah, it's like I said, I've dealt with some of the stuff from coming home from war, and it's not as easy as some may make it out to be. So I definitely appreciate the kind words, and let him know that we support him and thank him for us. So what evidence is there that is making everyone think the television crossover event will be related to Thrawn? I keep hearing a lot of people saying that, but has there been any official announcement? I'd love to hear your thoughts and reasons. For the record, I'm praying you're right. I think everybody is. Thanks for the question, Katie. And yeah, so for those of you that don't know, I don't know why you wouldn't know. Sorry. In 2020, Kathleen Kennedy, during the investors call for Disney and Disney Plus, she was announcing all these new shows. She announced, Rangers of the New Republic and Ahsoka and Lando and all these other shows that were coming out. And she said that between, I think it was Ahsoka, Rangers of the New Republic, and Mando, those shows were going to cross over into one epic television event. I know Rangers of the New Republic has been canceled at this point. I know that. But now they've announced Skeleton Crew, so it's kind of a third show that's happening at the same time that'll probably be part of this. But she never said what it was. But the moment I was watching that live stream, the moment she said that, she hadn't even taken the breath for the next word yet. And in my mind, I already knew it was Thrawn. I don't know if it's the Force telling me that, but it seems to be the general consensus at this point. Look at the timing for some of these shows, okay? We don't know when this crossover event's coming. We don't know. It could be 2 years from now. It could be 8 years from now. I don't know, but I guarantee it's still happening. Dave Filoni has just talked about it again recently, which leads me to believe here in the next 2 to 3 years we're going to have this crossover event. The reason I believe this is you got to look at the timing of the shows that are coming out. Look at where Mando's at. Look at what we've gotten in Mando so far. The Ahsoka series is coming at the end of this year. We already know what that series is going to be. You got to look at Dave Filoni's comments about this crossover event. Not even the crossover event, just talking about Ahsoka in general, when he's talking about there's so much source material there for post-Return of the Jedi legend stuff that he grew up reading that he loved. Well, gee, wonder what that could be. Heir to the Empire. That could be the only, that's the biggest thing that happened post-Return of the Jedi in the old EU. Thrawn. Well, who brought Thrawn into canon? Dave Filoni with Rebels. And so we know the Ahsoka series is going to be the spiritual sequel to Rebels. We know Thrawn's going to be in the Ahsoka series. We know that. We know Ezra's going to be in it. We know that. And so Ahsoka's mission with Sabine Wren from Rebels, their mission's going to be to go find Ezra in the unknown regions. And Thrawn. Remember, we got the mention for Thrawn also in Mando Season 2 when Ahsoka is, interrogating this I don't remember what her name was, the magistrate or whatever her name was, asking where her master was, where's Grand Admiral Thrawn. First time his name's ever been said in live action. Just saying his name in live action was like, so imagine what it's going to be like when we see him on screen. Thrawn is a big baddie. He, honest to God, even in canon, he's a big baddie. He is smart. He is cunning. He is impossible to read, and he is really smart, and he's rarely ever wrong. Rarely. He's wrong sometimes, but, he kind of underestimated the Rebels a little bit in Rebels toward the end of the season finale. But I think it's something that he learned from. And I'm convinced at this point, because we know Ahsoka, that's going to be a limited run. And it's kind of a limited series. I don't think it's going to get more than one season. I think it's just going to tell this story. And I think it's only going to be the conduit to get Thrawn into this, like what they're calling the Mandoverse, right? And so I think I'm not even going to say I think. I know it's going to be Mando. Or I'm sorry, it's going to be Thrawn. Ahsoka is going to go find Ezra. They're going to have to fight Thrawn once. And Thrawn's probably going to let him get away. Or maybe Thrawn's already pulling the strings. I don't know. We've already had some teases that Thrawn could be pulling the strings. And I think he's going to let him get away. He's going to be building his forces up. And we know he's in the unknown regions. We know he sent Eli Vanko out there with the Chiss. We know that. And so I think he's going to be showing his face again. Right after the Ahsoka series, after everything happens, I think he's going to end up coming back on the scene. And you know what? I'll go as far as to say this. That could be when you get your young Han, Luke, and Leia story from the question before. That could very well be when we get it, is fighting Thrawn. We could very well get a pretty good, not a verbatim, but a pretty good adaptation of Heir to the Empire as this crossover event. And that's what all the signs are pointing to. No, there's been no official announcement, but there's been some really heavy hinting. There's been some seriously heavy hinting that that's going to be what this show is, or what this crossover event is. So, and Dave Filoni even made some comments about whether or not some characters were going to survive, some weren't. I don't know. So it's a safe bet at this point, and I'm excited. I've actually lost sleep over it, believe it or not, thinking about a live action crossover event with all these characters, possibly Han, Luke, and Leia fighting Thrawn in live action. I don't even, like, I'm getting chills right now just thinking about it. So I'm pretty sure that that's what this is going to end up being. I think they know that we know that's what it's going to end up being. I don't think we're going to get an announcement anytime soon for it. But imagine for a moment at the end of, I don't know, let's say Mando Season 4. I think that's going to be the best place for something like this, because at that point, the Ahsoka series will be out, Skeleton Crew will be out. Excuse me. And I'm going to make a prediction, and it's going to be a bold one. And you guys can let me know in the chat or in the comments if you think I'm absolutely bonkers. But I'm going to make a prediction here. You remember at the end of Season 2 of Mando, we had that little end credit scene that announced the Book of Boba Fett, the series The Book of Boba Fett? I'm going to predict, I'm going to say, and I'm going to say this with, no, this is going to happen. There's going to be an end credit scene at the end of Season 4 of Mandalorian, because it's already written. We're going to get an end credit scene that's basically a trailer. Not a trailer, but it's a scene that's going to act as a trailer for the crossover event, and it's going to be Thrawn. I'm gonna mark that down right now for the record. That's what's going to end up happening. I'm pretty sure that that's exactly what it's going to end up being. So, I think at this point all bets are off. I think it's a pretty safe bet that that's what the live stream is going to be. So, I'm going to say put your chips on it. I'm going to say put your chips on it. Stick with me, kid. Put your chips on it. That's what it's going to end up being. So thank you for sending in the question. I do appreciate it. Question number 4 this week, the final question this week, comes from Ray Bales. And Ray sends in, I'm a lifelong Star Wars fan and have read all of the expanded universe novels and comics, but I'm just now beginning to get into the new canon because I'm afraid it won't live up to what has come before. I was always under the assumption that the expanded universe was canon, but lately I'm hearing from different sides it never was, and it always was. Can you shed some light on whether the expanded universe was ever considered canon? Also, is there any reason they couldn't still produce those novels and comics? Thanks for the question, Ray. And this is a question that comes up quite often, and I get why it comes up all the time. I get it, and it makes sense. So let me pull the question up again, because this has a couple of different aspects to it. So shed some light on whether the expanded universe was ever considered canon. No, it was never considered canon. I think the fans and the authors and even the publishers wanted it to be considered canon, because who wouldn't want to be able to play around in that universe with official Star Wars history, right? I think they wanted it to be so badly, which I don't blame them. If I was writing a book, I'd want it to be considered canon too, good or bad. I don't care. It was bad. Hey, did you get to write a Star Wars book? No, then shut up. That's kind of the mentality I would have. And so I think they wanted it to be canon so badly, but George Lucas himself never considered it canon. I remember he said in an interview, I should have pulled the quote up before going live, but there was a quote that he gave to a magazine one time talking about that stuff, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said basically that there was that universe, and then there was his universe. And his universe, everything was official canon, official history. This over here was basically glorified fan fiction. That doesn't mean that he didn't pull from some of that for his future movies. There were things from the EU, like, for example, the planet Coruscant. That was pulled from, I think it was Heir to the Empire, actually, the Thrawn trilogy, into canon in the prequels with being the seat of government for the Republic. And so he kind of cherry-picked what he wanted out of it and left the rest of it. As far as he was concerned, there was no Mara Jade. I know, I'm sorry. There was no Mara Jade, there was no Kyle Katarn. You know what I mean? There were none of these other characters. But the films that he had always talked about doing that were sequels, he did always want to be about the grandkids, not necessarily Jaina and Jason and Anakin Solo, but about the grandkids and Ben Skywalker and all them. But he never considered any of those canon. I think the fan base considered it canon because they wanted it to be. I think the authors really pushed that, especially when you're putting out a trilogy of novels, the Heir to the Empire trilogy, that says that you put on the back cover the official continuation of the Star Wars trilogy. It wasn't, though. It wasn't the official continuation. For the timeline, for the fans' timeline, yeah, absolutely it was. But it just was never considered canon. So to answer that part of your question, no, it was never considered canon. George Lucas himself has said that, so that part has been completely laid to rest. The other part of your question was, also, is there any reason they couldn't still produce these novels and comics? No, there's no reason they couldn't do that. There's no reason whatsoever. The fact that they are still publishing these Legends novels, matter of fact, I'll go as far as to say they're still re-releasing them with the Essential Legends collection that they're releasing different waves of every couple months, where they put 3 or 4 more Legends novels out. They're calling them the Essential Legends collection. The fact that you're putting out these books still, they're not connected to your timeline whatsoever, but you're still re-releasing them and putting them under a Legends banner and not worrying about whether or not people think they're canon or not, means that you could still be producing these novels, slap the Legends banner on it if you really want to, and put them out there. There's no reason why. Matter of fact, that would be a great way for authors to cut their teeth on writing canon. You want to write a Star Wars book? Well, how about you write a non-canon Legends EU novel first? We'll see how well that does. And then, do a couple of those. And if people really like your stuff, we'll have you write a canon story. You know what I mean? That would be a really great way. And I know there's a huge fan base for that timeline, for that material. And I know people love that. I know people love Legends stuff. And don't get me wrong, there's some really good stuff in Legends that deserves to be continued. So I don't see any reason at all why they couldn't put those out. You know what I mean? As far as comics go, put out Legends comics, and so I don't see a reason why they couldn't keep publishing stuff like that. So no, there's no reason whatsoever. The fact that, canon novels, basically they all have the A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away on the cover, and Legends novels all have the Legends, the big gold Legends banner across the top of it. Yeah, you could absolutely keep putting them out. I don't see why not at all, as long as you put that on there to differentiate. Because some people are going to get confused. People get confused now on what's canon and what isn't, but not very many. For the most part, I think people have grasped the concept that there's 2 different timelines. And I think you could definitely continue that. There's a market for it. That's basically printing money. Those stories deserve to be continued. They really do. So there's no reason for it whatsoever why they couldn't do that. So thanks for sending in the question. What do you guys think? Do you think they could split them into 2 timelines and tell this story over here and tell this story over here? Because it's all Star Wars. Just because they decanonized, or I shouldn't even say decanonized because it was never canon in the first place. Just because they decided to canonize everything moving forward and just kind of forget about everything from the past doesn't mean you can't still go back and read those books and enjoy them. The books are still there. It's not like George Lucas is hunting them down like he did the holiday special. He's letting everybody still keep those books, So absolutely. And, it's funny because there was a comment that I remember Kathleen Kennedy making, and I thought it was hilarious. How she was like, we're not Marvel. We don't have books and comic books as source material to base our stuff off. Star Wars movies are hard. I remember that. And I was like, you've got like 280 books that you can pull ideas from. And it was almost like somebody told her that, because after she made that comment, that's when we got like Thrawn. That's when we started getting some of these other characters pulled in from Legends into canon. You know what I mean? Some of these stories and whatnot. So they could do it. I don't know why they're not doing it. I think they just want people to focus on what is their timeline, what is theirs, and nothing more. So that's all it is, I promise. So no, there's no reason, and I think they need to do it. So thanks for sending in the question, guys. I do appreciate it. Let's go to the live chat for a little bit. I got a couple people hanging out in the live chat watching the episode live. And we've been going for like 45, 46, 47 minutes. So let's look at some live chats for a little while. We'll just see what you guys want to talk about. Let's see here. Nicholas Albers is in the chat. What's going on, brother? Nick is a good friend of ours. He's been on the show before. He's in our 1138 chat. Glad you could join the episode, brother. Dale, okay, hang on. Real quick. I want to say, I'm no good with names. You guys know this. I butcher names horribly. Sometimes I'll get them right, and I pat myself on the back when I get them right, but most of the time I get them wrong. And if I get your name wrong, please don't take it personally. I mean nothing by it. I'm no good with names. So Dale Erdman, I think is how you say your name. Dale's hanging out in the chat. They spent a lot of time and money on that. I think you were talking about the Luke Skywalker and Book of Boba Fett. They're not willing to do that for every show and character they want to do it with. However, they are making advances every time they do it. They are. They're taking huge leaps and bounds forward every single time they do it. Like I said, in Rogue One, when they did it for the first time, it was like, okay, whatever. And Rise of Skywalker, it was like, okay, it's not bad. Mando came along, okay, still not perfect, but pretty good. And then when Book of Boba Fett came along, holy crap, right? You're right. It's an expensive process, but it's also one of those things that should get cheaper as we go. As the technology advances, what we can do now should get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, right? Not quality-wise, but I mean, it should be cheaper to do stuff like that. Look at Photoshop, right? Remember, there was a time where if you wanted photos edited, you had to like go to this professional editor, and it cost a crap load of money to do it. Now, I got Photoshop for free on my computer. I can do it myself, So deepfake stuff, it's going to happen with that too. You watch. Luke in the Book of Boba Fett was a special case. He really was. It was just, I can't get over how perfect it was. It was so good. Let's see. Dale says, the Mandalorian end credits scene will be Ahsoka most likely for Season 3. I agree with that. There probably will be, and we don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 episodes either. Very well could be a tease there for Ahsoka. Like I said earlier, they teased Book of Boba Fett. They could definitely tease Ahsoka in this one. Nick says, we will get an end credits scene for Season 3. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm almost positive of it. So Andor did an end credits scene at the end of its season. I think it's going to end up being a thing now with Star Wars, where you get the end credits scene at the end of the season to tease whatever is going to be coming down the line. I'm going to go back and say Season 4 of Mandalorian is going to be the Thrawn stuff. At that point, we'll have Skeleton Crew going. We'll have Ahsoka out, and it'll be done. We'll have all of Season 4 of Mando. No telling what that story is going to end up being. So we're going to have all these other series out. And, yeah, I think that's what it's going to end up being. I really do. So, Season 4, you mark my words. You watch. Dale says, I think they'll hint at Thrawn and or Ezra. They very well could and tease him. I definitely think you're right, because it's coming. We all know it's coming. We've already had the hints in Mando this season with the Purrgil in hyperspace and with Zeb, which was an awesome cameo. Yeah, I definitely think that that we're going to be getting some really cool teases, especially out of Celebration this year, because I know we're getting a Skeleton Crew trailer. I know we're getting an Ahsoka trailer. I know we are. And so capping off Season 3 of Mando with a Thrawn and Ezra tease, mind-blowing. Let's see here. Dale says, I think you're talking about Legends and canon stuff here. The problem I think George had with Legends is that the writers tried to make it a more adult fantasy instead of the kids' fantasy he created with the original movies. I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you one bit. I think that is definitely a problem that he had, because George Lucas has always been on the record saying Star Wars is for kids. And I mean, we're all kids at heart. We all love Star Wars, but for the most part, it's for the kids. And that's what he's always preached. You know what I mean? And now a lot of those books were written by, you got to look at it this way too. A lot of those books were written by people that were kids when Star Wars came out, that Star Wars was made for. They grew up and they wanted to tell their own stories, their own mature stories that kind of mirrored where they were at with their maturity. And so, yeah, we started getting some more adult stories in Star Wars, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But yeah, I think you're right. I'm glad he pulled some stuff from Legends, though. And, another example to show that it's not canon, look at what was the Jedi's name, the clone Jedi in the Heir to the Empire trilogy. I don't remember his name. It was like Seaboth or George Sabath or something like Kaboth. If I remember how to say, I don't remember how to say his name, but he was a clone. And so basically George Lucas completely turned on its head what the concept of the Clone Wars was. I mean, if that was the case, George Lucas had this idea what Clone Wars was. And then Timothy Zahn, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking bad on Timothy Zahn. I promise you I'm not. He's the king as far as I'm concerned of expanded universe stuff. And I think he had an idea for the Clone Wars of what they were, and it ended up being something completely different. So that obviously, I mean, there's discrepancies all over the place between what Lucas made in the prequels and some of the EU stuff. So, I think he just cherry picked what he wanted out of it, and that was basically the end of it. So, let me see here. Everything newly published is marked Legends if it's not canon, right? So I don't see why they couldn't keep doing it. I really don't. Not without keeping it Legends. Most people don't want to be confused by them making movies and shows with the EU. Movies and shows are different. I'm not sure. That's a good point. I never thought about that. Anytime we've ever talked about publishing Legends stuff alongside canon, it's always been novels and comics. We've never once talked about films and TV, but that's a really good point. I don't think you could pull off something like that. No, now, maybe you could, because Star Wars Visions isn't canon. None of the Star Wars Vision stuff is canon. But I think there may be a way to pull it off. I don't think you do anything live action. I don't think they're going to pour the resources and the money into a live action EU show. Animated, maybe. Something in the form of Visions. Little shorts. I think that's more likely to happen. And so I'm not going to, at this point, I don't say never anymore. You never say never with Star Wars anymore. You just don't. Look at Mandalorian. I think I said it last week. All the cameos that keep popping up in The Mandalorian, I'm expecting me to pop up in it at some point and still be surprised that I'm in it. You know what I mean? So I don't say never anymore. They might end up doing it at some point, but I don't know. They're not going to use them as they are. Well, I think I lost you here for a second. Sure, they can use ideas. But what they do will be looked at as ruining their favorite characters. You're not wrong. There's always going to be people that, I'm assuming you're talking about Han, Luke, and Leia. Yeah, there's always going to be somebody nitpicking it. But look at the reception that Luke Skywalker got with Book of Boba Fett and with Mando. Look at that reception for a minute. I mean, there were reaction videos all over YouTube of people bawling their eyes out. Grown men crying. I'm not knocking you. I've cried. I was crying watching it. I didn't record myself crying, but I was crying watching it. I was freaking out. That's the kind of effect that has on people. So imagine like a whole film or a whole crossover event with these three. That would be amazing to me. Like I said, I don't think the odds are, it's less than half, definitely. I mean, obviously less than half that's ever going to happen. But, oh man, it's like one of those pipe dreams. It'd be so fun to get, wouldn't it? Nick says, originally I hated the idea when they made everything Legends, but I get why. I get it too. Honestly, doing the canon universe was a very ambitious idea, especially for that time. They made that announcement that everything was going to be canon from now on before the first show even came out, before Rebels even came out. They had already said, we are so confident. We're so confident in what we're doing that everything from here on out is going to be canon. And that's really ambitious. That's really big. Not world building, but universe building. That's huge. And so I think for the most part, they've gotten it pretty right. A lot of the books are really good. the last couple of years, I think they've dipped a little bit in quality, some of the books. They were really good for the first 5 years, 6 years, with a couple of stinkers here and there. But I think now we're getting to a point where there's so many books coming out. The High Republic stuff, I'm loving the High Republic stuff. I think that's a great universe to be playing around in. I think that's a great time period to be playing around in because you're not constrained by anything. And so you can creatively do whatever you want to do. But yeah, I get why they made everything Legends in the first place. And when you say, hey, anything that came out before didn't happen. No, just forget about all that. Now we're starting over, and this is what we're doing. I think that was honestly a smart move if they were going to do it. Because so here's a great example. Look at what's going on with DC movies right now. They're bringing James Gunn in to do a reboot. Is it really a reboot, or is it a pseudo reboot, a soft reboot? Is it... I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But they're basically saying we're going to wipe out everything that happened before, and we're going to move forward from there. And, okay, cool. That's great. Do it right if you're going to do it. I mean, don't confuse us with what's real and what isn't. Because DC hasn't come out officially and said, none of that happened. Well, it happened. I watched it. I mean, and if you're carrying some of the characters over, why? You're either rebooting it or it's a sequel, right? Here's another thing we can talk about that I know I'm probably going to lose some followers for even saying these words on a Star Wars podcast, but look at what Star Trek did with the Kelvin timeline. Yes, I watched Star Trek too. Don't give me any crap. But look at what they did with the Kelvin timeline, which I know rubbed some Star Trek fans the wrong way. They basically went back and soft rebooted it with a reboot sequel that happened prequel-ish. You know what I mean? Like, they really went for it. So with Star Wars, I'm glad that they came out and said, hey, this is the cutoff. It's none of that happened. This is all real. So at least they gave us that. At least they kind of laid it out for us like that. Dale said I got your name right. First try. Good. That's good. That makes me feel good. Nick says they had to move forward and create their own timeline and not be beholden to what was written prior to. Yeah, they had their own ideas of what they wanted to do. Can you imagine having all those books? It was like 270 books, I think. 280 books or something like that. Can you imagine George Lucas signing this contract over to him? And let's say, he wanted to really stick it to Disney. Can you imagine him signing that and saying, you can make all the movies you want, but you have to stay to these books? Man, so somebody at Disney has to sit down and read all 280 books to know what the next movie is going to end up being? Can you imagine? That would have sucked, right? And then if you've read the books, there's no surprises. You already know what's coming. So, I think it was the right move. I really do. Dale Erdman says, otherwise, they'd be pestered to pay Marvel and Dark Horse for their IP. Yeah, no, you're right. He says, George got away with using their stuff because he created the original IP, and said their stuff can be canon until it's not. Yeah, basically. And it's a lot of it, there was a lot of contradictory stuff in there. Like I said, with the Clone Wars stuff. And I don't remember the name of the character, but I remember reading, there was a book. If you look at the timeline in the book, and it was like, in the books were like 10 years apart from each other. I don't remember the name of the character. One character died in book A. He died. Dead. D-E-D, dead. and like 10 years later, a book came out, and he's in it. Like, what? And so the author ended up coming back being like, yeah, I forgot that, I forgot. Or it was something I didn't know he was dead or something along those lines. There was nobody like trying to tie everything together or whatnot. So it was, there's contradictions in it, and there's contradictions in canon. There are. I'm going to say it. There's quite a few. But yeah, I think that was the right choice for George to do, was to cherry pick what he wanted and use those ideas, because it was fan service at that point. That was George Lucas's version of fan service. Anybody that had read Heir to the Empire, and when they go see Phantom Menace, oh, Coruscant? What? Oh, sweet. We get to see Coruscant for the first time? That was cool. So, yeah, no, I think that's exactly what was going on. So, George Kaboth, yeah. Okay, so I thought I had it right, but I wasn't entirely sure. And, boy, he was a trip, wasn't he, in Heir to the Empire? Definitely a trip. So, guys, we just hit the hour mark. I think less than a minute ago. So let's go ahead and call this episode. I've got to do a live stream. If you guys are watching this live right now, I'm doing a live stream at 10 p.m. Central Standard Time with Star Wars Newsnet. We're doing Star Wars Newsnet Live. We're going to be talking about the episode of Mando a little bit more in depth than what I did here. And we're going to be breaking it down a little bit. And we're going to be talking with you guys in the live chat again. So head over to their YouTube channel, Star Wars Newsnet. Make sure to like them so that you know when we go live on there. And even if you guys are listening to this after the fact, head over there and like their page. We're going to be going live every Thursday night and talking whatever show came on Wednesday, whether it be Bad Batch, Mando, Skeleton Crew, Ahsoka, whatever is coming out at the time. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking a little bit about some celebration predictions, I think. And we'll kind of see what you guys want to talk about in the live chat. So head on over there and check that out too. Hey, before I sign off for the week, I want to bring up one more time and let you guys know, I'm going to reiterate, the 24-hour live stream on May 6th. I'm very excited about this. I can't wait to do it. Like I said earlier, it's something that I've been planning for quite a while, and it's something that means a lot to me. And I would really, really appreciate it if as many people as possible could tune in for this thing. And, you know, even if you don't want to donate and you just kind of want to hang out and help support, you know, get the number of views up on the stream so that we can get, you know, maybe some attention and get some more people in to help donate and raise money for this, great. And you know, just because, and this is a perfect world, like I said earlier, hopefully we get rid of all the books. Hopefully everybody gets the book they want, and I'm able to send out a crap load of novels as thank yous. But hopefully we run out, you know, and even if, hopefully that doesn't stop the donations. Hopefully we can get everybody in to donate for this cause. So I wanted to reiterate that one more time. Mark your calendars, May 6th, 24-hour live stream. I'm very excited for it. So until next week, this is Brian signing off. Keep it civil. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about everything we talked about. Keep it civil, and I'll yak at you guys next week. Everybody have a good night, and may the Force be with you guys. You've just been listening to the latest episode of the Star Wars Canon Podcast. I'm Brian Miller, joined by my co-host, Usuf Wally. You can stream new episodes of the podcast every Saturday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Anchor.fm, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so at patreon.com/1138productions. Be sure to like and subscribe on whichever platform you're listening in on. If you'd like to get a question on the show, you can send it in to us at starwarscanonpodcast@gmail.com. Until next week, keep it civil, and may the Force be with you.